Okay, so we're slowly coming to the second half, and we have another guest, Ilja. Ilja, as I told you, he was actually responsible for the data transformation of MOL Group, and they brought it from 30 different entities, 30 different infrastructures, basically, to one functioning team, and not one functioning team which is supporting domain teams across the whole company. I have one interesting thing. When we met with Ilja, he said that because it was everything new and putting together, that they have, how many years did you say of the backlog at BI?
Well, I guess like a couple of 3, 4, 5 years.
Light years. I mean,
yeah.
And so it was actually pretty hard situation that Ilja was in, and he actually started to think differently, which was something I really liked. And he was thinking how to change the processes and the architecture of the teams, and what we can do as BI, and what should be not done by BI team, but should be put into domains and people. So I actually invited in Ilja today because he has a real experience with already done or first phase or transformation into DataMesh style architecture and way of work. So I thought it'd be interesting if you can spoil, what were the good things, bad things, and have some framework which you prepared. So the floor is yours, Ilja.
Okay, so thank you for very nice interaction. Yeah, well, I believe we've been through the entire journey of implementing DataMesh, as far as I'm aware of the definition of it. And my goal for today is to introduce to you the stages that we went through, and maybe talk about 3 kind of key elements in each stage. So I will quickly introduce my slide, and then I will sit down because of the microphone. But basically, what I would like to talk about is the stages that we went through, and what changes were happening through the stages, and also what are individual success factors to actually pass the stage and to proceed further. So you've heard that MOL Group is a pretty complex group. It's a holding of 20, 30 companies, and my team was responsible for serving data to the group. We would operate in different modes, let's say. Some entities, such as MOL, we would support directly end-to-end. Some other entities, such as Košík, we would be providing data platform and, let's say, expertise and consulting services. So we would be running in very diverse ways of operations. When I joined MOL or MOL Group, we would have probably 5, 8 people who would be called BI engineers, and we would have more platforms in the group than actually people who would operate them. So my struggle was, and we would have just everything. We would have Kabula, of course. We would have good data. We would have SAP Business Warehouse, Analyzer, Business Objects, Lumira. We had Hadoop. We still have HANA for some purposes. And so you've got it's a pretty broad range of tools that we would have. When I joined MOL Group, my mission was, and you probably know the story, but 5 years ago or 6 years ago, so Rockaway and and PPF and EPH decided to invest into the group, and they wanted to transfer the group into the profitable business. And they strongly believe that data is a crucial part for changing the way the business is operated. And my role was to kind of deliver it. So I came into the group with pretty kind of a nice vision of the things we should be doing. On the top of the pyramid, there was things such as dynamic pricing, personalization, and these things. And on the very low level, the lowest level of the pyramid, there would be basic things such as consolidated reporting and basic understanding of the data. I quickly ran into the issue that with the central team, I'm just not able to deliver it because the backlog, as Pavel mentioned, it was like worth of work for 5 years, and it was just impossible. We would be, we would be walking in the building, and we would be hiding from our internal customers, just not to tell them, yes, sorry, mate, you got to wait for longer because there is some other priority that we need to deal right now. And it's really frustrating, and not only for me, but for the people in the team as well. So I was looking into the way how to actually change that, and I'm not very technical person, so I'm rather coming from the business side of the company. So I always try to think of the purpose of the data, and when people talk about data, I'm asking them, okay, what do you want to do with that, and how do you want to apply it, and do you have, if you had data, are you actually able to act on that? So I was looking into, we talked with Pavel and Padak and other guys from Kabula about how to actually approach that problem, because they were actually the only one progressive enough to be able to lead non-technical conversation with me. And at that time, Pavel introduced to me the idea of Gartner's distributed something. Now you are coming with DataMesh, and so you are giving me all those labels. So
Buzzwords, that's what I do.
Yeah. So basically we decided, and I sold this idea to the company management and to the investors, that we need to do this dramatic change in the way how we actually work with data. So if I am to talk about the stages, so we have obviously preparation, rollout, and expansion. What I would like to point out is actually what's changing, and there are changing two things. One of them is the technical side of the way how the data is actually prepared, who does what, and who's responsible for what technically. So if you look at the initial stage, and we've talked about this, I've heard it in here, that basically BI actually traditionally serves all the data and creates dashboards and reports, and people consume it. And basically what people, users, typically do, or the interaction between BI and business at that stage, is typically about deviations. That there is something strange in the data, why is it there, and explain me the deviation. Yesterday there was some number, and today is the other one, it doesn't make sense. So basically it's the status that you are in the beginning. If you want to move to the further stages, where what's typical for the rollout stage is that you have you want your business people to actually build their own reports and dashboards if possible, and you want to support them with data, because that actually leads to a change when business is building the data understanding of how the data is actually created, and they look into the meaning of the data, and BI roles shifts into more the function of explaining how the data is actually created. Not necessarily technically, but what actually the data mean, and what is the granularity of it, and how do you apply it. And yeah?
What do you mean by business in this case?
Well, to keep up with this data mesh terminology, it's probably domains. So by business, I mean, and I've been thinking about that, it's a domain, let's say. It could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be IT, it could be any function in the company, but that also could be a solution. It could be a call center. It doesn't have to be necessarily a department, but it's basically a group of people with the purpose. So
Pricing group.
Pricing, for example, yeah.
That's a big one for you.
Anybody other than BI?
Yeah, basically, yes. Yes.
So people who are actually working on the data, consuming it, and they have common domain. So it's kind of like non-BI people.
Yeah. So ultimately, where we want to get to, and this is where we are at this point, I mean, the job is never done, but we are in the stage of expansion, and we've achieved that we have, on the business side, partners or people who form data teams and who build their own solutions. So they involve external companies, or they hire their own data scientists, and they just calculate complex data solutions. And the role of the core BI team is rather like in providing like core data. It brings a huge advantage, and it's the one that actually BI people, they typically are like initially like quite technical, and you cannot focus on too many things, so you got to be good at processing the data, and people in the business, they are good at understanding the business. So you want to kind of let the business people to apply their business know-how into the data. So this is what is happening in actually like the final stage of that. If I am to explain like what is important to get through, and when I am thinking backwards, like at the preparation stage, if you want to move forward, before you actually begin involving people and kind of giving them access to the data and asking them to do more with data than they used to do. So there are three key things that I believe are important if you want to proceed, or these are your jobs to do in the preparation stage. One of them is definitely to think of the scalable architecture, because you never see the future and you currently see what are current needs. Maybe you have some insights in what business strategy is, and then you kind of can foresee what you have to get ready for. But anyway, this can change like from day to day, and you've got to have architecture that allows you to be very flexible and to actually copy like business strategy and to adjust.
Which, by the way, if I may, just like I'm still with your question and this, what you did. So you first thought about how to actually put people in the domains, because you didn't have enough people in the center of BI to support them, right?
Yeah.
And then you say it has to be flexible enough. You're thinking because it's gonna change. Did it change with small group in the last 3 years?
Well, definitely, because like we would be acquiring companies, so there would be an expansion, but then some businesses would terminate, and would be sold or move to another part. So we were really like shuffling with the organization.
And when you put things in the domain, did they change within the domain, like the pricing domain, or was it always the same people doing the same things, or did you have a partner? Oh, I'm referring to. I know.
What do you mean?
Well, you were talking that the pricing domain was one big for you, right? Mm-hmm. And you were first thinking how to switch in domains, how to support it. What I really love is the changing role of the central BI, the technical, right? Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, you said like you have to be prepared for things change. And in the pricing domain, you were first working with the partner that was doing the pricing, and then you took it over and did it internally, right?
Yeah.
With business people, but like. Because you had this architecture with the domains and quantums, etc., was it possible, was it easier than if you would do it in traditional architecture?
Yeah, I guess so. Because this domains concept allows you to separate the environment, so you can quite simply exchange people in the project, or just change the purpose of it.
And so is it like what Pavel was saying there, because you have multiple domains, you don't have one big mess, but you have 5 different or 10 different, small messes, which are easier to spot that there's a mess and where?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this distributed system, it also brings its own challenges, but definitely you cut it down into the smaller parts, and it's way easier to actually navigate through that and to assign ownership, because it's very critical. This is something I believe is very important for this data mesh concept, is to have to define responsibility and to always have a clear owner of every particular domain or project, whatever is there.
And one more question: when you started, the data mesh concept was not born yet, right? Mm-hmm. But you still kind of ended in the data mesh, architecture. And what I really was your thinking, you didn't want to scale the BI department. The typical thinking would be, okay, I have 5 years of backlog, I need 5 times more people. in the BI department. We said, no, I really want to change the role of BI department from being the doers to being, the guardians of governance, of platform, and the consistency of data, as we were talking before that. And then you actually outsource the work to the domain people. So how did you come up with that thinking? I think that's...
Yeah, it's probably because I like to keep things simple. And I believe that if it's simple, then it's like easier to live with. And like if I were to provide all the solution for the entire group centrally, it would be just a huge complexity. It would not be possible, I think. Like also, you've got conflicting priorities in the organization. Like you hear it everywhere, every time that companies struggle with setting their 2-3 top priorities. So even if they did, anyway, for that big company, even if you had 2-3 priorities, they cannot be that detailed so you can implement them throughout the organization. You always have to give some autonomy to the domain or business owners of marketing, sales, etc., to actually operate independently. So if I had a central team, I would definitely want them to focus on those 2-3 priorities, and I would be in permanent conflict with the domain owners and management in the company.
And how did it work out? You say you started with just a couple of people in the BI department, and so like when you created the domains and you kind of like start to service the domains, in the tribes or whatever. How many data users or people working with data, like not consuming the dashboard but really doing something, you have now?
Yeah. Well, at this point, we have like maybe 60, 70, 80, I don't know. That would be the number of Kabula users. And we would have... Sorry?
159.
Yeah, is it? Okay. Yeah. You counted for us, so yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, how you define it. Like they have to be active. And so I'm talking about real active people. And we use Tableau on top of Kabula, which is pretty autonomous solution as well, and there is way higher number of people.
So I would say, like from what you're saying, right now you actually 10 times, enlarge the number of people doing data, not consuming report, but pipelines, engineering, creating data products, right?
Yeah.
I remember a story when we came with Parak into warehouse, and the people at logistic warehouse were really frustrated with the BI department because it didn't deliver anything, and they just wanted to have their own server under the table so they could do it, but there's zero governance, right? And now they are actually, logistics is not only one of your largest users of data, but they actually created products which are then reused by other departments, other domains or tribes. So they actually start to behave in the product kind of like that way.
It definitely helps to maintain good relationship in the company because people are to some extent forced to communicate with each other because they provide the data to each other and information. Because so the concept that we have in place is that core BI team provides certified data, and these are core data sets. It's sales data, marketing data, warehouse data in terms of what's the stock and turnover, etc.
Like L0 layer.
Well, it's L1 actually, because we source all the data and then we transform them into data marts, and those data marts are guaranteed by the central team. And then we've got logistics, marketing, and many other domains. People get the data, enrich them, and then they are able to feed it back. So this is just an example. We've got this famous unit economics data set where we allocate logistics costs per order item, like a real true logistic cost of every delivery. We try to allocate directly to the item in the order. So this is not possible just technically to think of the algorithm. You've got to have this domain knowledge of the people, and this is what it brings actually.
And this is kind of a little bit, again, you are implementing some kind of hybrid approach to DataMesh, as Pavel is in Erste. And the purist DataMesh would say, oh, you shouldn't do it. It should be done. Everything should be in domains, and the central BI should not intervene. Is it possible or not in this situation?
I guess it is possible. Everything is possible. It's just,
is it practical?
I don't know, because I think it depends on the culture of the company and what is company ready to actually adopt. This is my philosophy, like I'm trying to build solutions around like people and the needs of the company instead of like keeping certain pattern of the technology. Or
Pavel was saying that it's gonna take them several years to actually do the full transition into mindset and process it, kind of like distributed DataMesh kind of like stuff. And how fast did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Or you, I mean, like you as a company. Right?
Yeah. Well, I guess I could say that we got into expansion after 3 years or something like that. But first year and a half, it was more like, just getting to know each other and really clarifying what are the needs. Is the concept good enough? Like, is it? So from the moment we decided to go this way until we reached expansion, it was maybe 18 months, something like that.
Was it worth it?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's.
How do you define was it worth it?
Well, first of all, we've got almost no backlog.
Yeah.
I mean, there is always work to do, but it's not like stressed. Like, of course, we've got to deliver, and it's got like a beautiful impact. It really removes tension between business and business intelligence because they are self-reliant and they can do on their own. And then it also creates like pretty good environment for the central team, let's say, because you don't have to do all the small things. You can focus on the major projects, and this is huge like motivation booster.
What I really like when we talk about that when we're preparing, Ilja shared like one thing with me that was like when they started, the BI data department was kind of like they didn't want to meet anyone, as he said, because they were afraid of people, right? And now it actually moved to a really strategic position that when there is a new project in the company, the first kind of like the data team is actually, like advising people and making sure that it makes sense, right? So
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it depends. Like, the company is huge because it's just big and complex. So, yes, we've got some really smart people on the team, and who are actually respected in the company for the knowledge and for the willingness to share their knowledge and the willingness to help. So that actually helps us to be involved in the major projects, but not every project we are part of, definitely not. Like, that still are like side streams. It's just a huge organization. Yes.
And when you say we are a huge organization, can you like quantify it? Like how big are you? How complex?
Yeah, so we've got like, just in terms of the users, we've got 600 users in Tableau. And those people consume information from us. And all of them, they are to a certain level involved in decision making, in the projects, in the changes that we run through the company. It's like, I believe Mall Group struggles with prioritization a little bit, so that also creates a lot of complexity and conflicts in terms of what to do.
But
Sorry, questions.
Yeah, sorry, so many questions.
You're having such a nice conversation, it's very difficult to interrupt it. First question, so you said different domains, right? Marketing, sales, etc. And you have multiple different companies. So
and multiple different countries.
Multiple different companies, multiple different countries. How aligned are the domains across the different countries and companies? Is it marketing, or is it marketing malls? Is that marketing rockets? Is it marketing whatever else you have?
It's very hybrid mode because we couldn't fit into like an easy template. So we've got like a marketing domain that serves the entire group, that collects the data from Google Analytics, from all advertising platforms. It puts it into one place, it's one project, and everything is done in there, and then the data is distributed to the rest of the company. Then there are...
So like in this case, you have kind of like domain and subdomains?
Well, it's more like a domain, one domain that is like universal for the group. And then there are domains that are related to the core systems, ERP most often, and every company has got their own ERP system, so there are domains that are processing their data and serve them further to the people. So it's not like one cut or one line.
Okay, so another question. If I would buy a product on one of the companies, because of different products that each of the sub-companies sells, right? Rocklick sells food, CZC sells appliances. Let's say I buy an appliance on CZC, would Rocklick recommend me food that I could prepare on this appliance? For example, or is it not that complicated, not that far?
It's koshik, but
I mean, there are some.
I really don't know.
No, it's okay.
There are some legal barriers that prevent us from doing that. So this is not.
Okay, so one more question. So in the end, in the expansion, you have business building their own solution. So does it mean that each business unit, each domain has their own set of analysts and people responsible for their data environment?
Yes, but it's again like very diverse. Definitely in our environment, like marketing was the most on the edge, like technological wise. So they would have their data scientists who would extrapolate costs and see how predict the spending and optimize bidding levels. And then on the other side, like departments such as sales, it's more like I don't want to say passive consumption of the data. So, but there is difference. So there are people who are more like farther in this concept and or teams, and then there are that are less.
And can you kind of like quantify that? Because like I from top of my head I can remember like the different teams that actually are very advanced, you know, in logistics and or the operations, etc. So what is the you know, like how many departments have to be serviced with the central and how many? Approximately.
I don't know, like maybe 6 they've got their own analysts that are really deep in the data, and then like 3 possibly would be like more served by the central team, something like that.
Sorry.
But that's really changing, you know, like it's very dynamic. And you know, you've got like certain needs that pop up at certain moments, so you focus on that area and then you withdraw from it and move to the other one. So we kind of used to shuffle people.
So the domains would be kind of like a feature teams in development, like you create a feature team around one thing and people come together from different parts of the company, do it, and then so there was two more questions.
It was factual. I wanted to ask I was now in the mall group, but I already looked it up on the internet.
So how was it?
Over 2,000.
Headcount,
Right, so I wanted to ask, you're the core BI, so are you serving like the main domains, like marketing for the whole group, or do you also serve like the marketing for specific shops? Because that at least for me, like how big are the domains really? Like who are you serving, and are they actually owners of the data, or are you owners and they're just the users? How does that work?
Yeah, so in terms of marketing, for example, there is part where we like collect central data and then provide it further. So that data is like sessions, clicks, click-through rates, of course, marketing spend allocated to the products from all the marketing platforms. So this is pretty standard processing. So this is something that was built by the central team. And then there is like a separate environment in which marketing team, they've got their own data scientists, and they get the data and they build their own models, enrich it with data from Exponent, for example, and build their own solutions. So like.
So it's a hybrid, right? Like you own the L1 layer in most cases, if I understand correctly, and then people start creating domains on top of that, and they actually create data products, you know, data sets which are then reused somewhere else. Yeah. Because there's one more interesting part which we didn't get to, and you are not using data just to look at, right? You're using data and then you are writing them back to systems. Which is,
Definitely.
And that by default creates a product which is used in the other systems.
Yeah, because this is the biggest value of this architecture. if you have like ways how to use the data like in a way not only to look, because if you wanna just look at the data, you don't need data mesh structure, I believe.
What's up?
Yeah, one question here. Because assuming you give so much power to different divisions, you are going to eventually find out the problem that, for example, marketing is going to develop a kick-ass model of some forecast of the new customers, let's say, and that model could be also used, let's say, for warehouse forecasting. But then, how does warehouse division find out that marketing is working on it in the first place? So, what is the line of communication, or do you step in as a mediator between those entities?
Yeah, one of the licensing here is actually about building community. This is pretty like critical part of that. So we've built community and we are still working with them. So basically in the initial preparation stage, we were trying to spot data champions, we call them, and to see who are those progressive people who actually would help us with implementing the change. And basically at certain point when enough things were ready for the business, we agreed with the CEO and the board that this is the concept we are going to push through the company, and we actually asked every manager to nominate at least one person or more into the data champions community. And for them, there is like a program of meetups and trainings and all that stuff that's needed. What I would say, actually, one thing, like Pavel was here talking about documentation and that it gets like obsolete as soon as it's ready. It's true, but it's very important for this concept because you've got to have very good documentation. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a technical one in a way that how the data are transformed and what functions are used, but rather on the output so that people who are new to the environment, so they can understand and they understand what's the menu of the data, and that's got to be written in the business language.
Well, that comes with the treating data as a product.
Yeah.
Because if you have a product, you need to describe what it does, what is the help, etc. Right? That's one of the concepts as well.
Yeah, sure.
There was one more question.
Yeah, I have a maybe follow-up to that actually. We encountered some problems with, let's say, dependencies between domains, where one domain would want to use the data from the other domain, and they would want it slightly differently than it is, and maybe they are deciding, should we wait for a couple of months before they improve it, or should we do another copy that will be similar but different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that happens. So there are basically two options. One of them is that they would wait. For how long, never knows. But then they've got the option to do it themselves because they have all the data. What's in this architecture is that all source data, they are available. So L0 level is almost public, let's say, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at the data because it's very raw. But if they have skilled people in the team, they can get the certified data mart and they can get additional data from the source systems, from L0, and enrich it. And after a certain time, if it proves to be a good solution, we just implement it into the core dataset and they can delete it from their solution.
So is there some kind of governance, somebody who would like monitor this and decide?
Like, yes, like there are some checks, let's say, but again, this community, that's the thing where it's happened.
And just like technically, they use the data catalog implementation, right? And so people can like publish it there.
I don't know.
Do we,
Davide?
Sure. Yeah. but it's not about that. But my point is that people see it there, and like it's kind of, as Ilja says, like what's best for most convenient for people wins on the long run. They are not trying to force it, which is kind of like very interesting, actually. But I don't think it would be possible if you would start with this concept from day one, right? It needed to grow.
Yeah, you've got to progress. That's the thing. You got to build the relationship with the people. You got to train them. In this final stage, we are trying to help actually those teams to hire people. So we used to be part of the interviewing process, etc. So it's more about like relationship as well.
There are some other.
So, how do you deal with change? Like the products change, they evolve. You you want to always be improving the products, introducing new features, or adding some, like business-wise changing what it is, what it doesn't mean to add something to the basket or something. I know exactly in your specific case, but business rules change, right? The game changes, how you buy stuff. How do you deal with that? How do you not lock everything up because I'm using that, I don't want you to change that, give me a month before I can adapt to your change. How do you do that?
Well, you have to do that. Like, you have to talk to people and agree on a plan, because if it's like a crucial change that will break your data, we just got to ask IT to postpone the release, for example, or to synchronize with us to implement changes. I mean, there is just like nothing special, I guess.
But again, well, from your point of view,
maybe I don't understand the
Well,
question. Sorry.
I think what's important here is again the focus on the owners of the data, right? Because if they are the owners, and in Pavel's case, right, who owns the data, right? For them, if people don't own the data, they just don't care if it's gonna change, right? But if I own the final data and I know that David is gonna be using it somewhere else, I see, right? Then I really care about that it doesn't, change upstream, right? Or it doesn't get screwed.
How do you do the change?
Well, as I said, you have to talk to people. It's just nothing better, right?
Okay.
Scream and pray.
Brace.
Then you have to either synchronize the release again, which we wanted to avoid, right, in the first place, or have some versioned APIs and stuff like that.
But it's always, like once you start working with this, you know what's in the beginning, right? And who actually owns it, because your team, your domain is creating that. So you're touching that, right? And usually what this is, and what Pavel was referring to when they move to, Agile, they actually creates a cross-functional team. So you have people, or you get in touch with people. You don't have to be working with them every day, but you create a relationship with them, so they know it's important for you. So, usually they just don't screw it, on the purpose, or just not knowing about it. Obviously it happens everywhere, right, Fisha? You see it everywhere. But then, it's about the infrastructure, about the platform, what enables you to do, etc., right? But the processes and the release processes are very similar to product releases. So, if you release products, new ones, you always look backwards, right? What's in the beginning. So this is, people start behaving and treating their data as a product.
But it's not all pink, right? There are problems. We get later notifications, some changes that we didn't know about. It's happening. So sometimes things crash.
My question literally is like, if you treat your data as a product, if you have a product that's a product, you have users and users of the product. And if that product is a user interface that you click on and you buy something, it's easy, right? You change a button that increases your chance of purchasing something that's good for the business. But now if you have a model that evaluates your customer lifetime value based on the old setup, and you change the setup and it biases the customer lifetime value now, how that all fits in the big picture. Like you have marketing people, you can tell them, hey, we're gonna release this, we think it's gonna improve the customer lifetime value. Yeah, if you give the data to everyone, right, everyone can tell you, please don't do that, right, because it's gonna break whatever we built.
Yeah, there are sometimes changes that are pretty robust and big. So what we do, or we typically publish a duplicate data set, because you don't really change data set. Sometimes you do, but sometimes there is just a change in the structure on the logic of the calculation. So you can release a duplicate data set, and you give people time to transfer to the new one, to adjust their transformations, and to actually relink their sources to the new source.
An A/B test, right? But your assumption that in the product you can release a new button is really, it's good for the B2C, but I think Pavel would kill us, if we would, change how Kebola looks tomorrow, which is probably happening right now. Just wanted to let you know. But it's more B2B relationship. So if you have other business users that are using your product, you need to really work with them, and you guys will kill us as well if you would change.
You know, like in the end of the day, you want to sell more stuff. Right? So if let's say I'm a product manager who wants to improve how the basket looks like and how I have a feature that I know will increase the sales by 5%. Will you stop?
No, we won't. But the thing is that typically you've got the idea, and then you've got some kind of a preparation phase for implementation phase for the change. And this is the period of time when you get to notify BI, and you have time to adjust, so you don't postpone the implementation.
The whole bringing of the notion of the product, it also brings the notion of product management, the releases, the change management, the whole thing around it. The same concept probably will apply or do apply, you know, with the product and with the changes.
And these tensions are always in the product development as well. You know, like here, well, we have so many ideas we would like to implement like this, right? Because they would increase your UX experience by 25.3%, right? We tested it on the small group. But if we would do it too many times over and over, right, just like, then it's all. So the tension between continuous integration, right, and about the user, part of the user experience is also that things change, but not every day and everything, right? So it's always a balance finding. And we struggle with that in our product every time as well, right? You guys, some of you know, right? So it's always, you know, going forward and try to get better, right? Okay. So any other questions, or are we going to the beers now? And okay. Beers, Ilja, beers. Ilja and beers. Okay, Ilja, thank you very much for this. It's been a really great journey, and thanks, you know, for the possibility of being there with you. One thing I loved actually in the beginning was that you started with asking the business people what they want. So we actually did over 80 different workshops with business people. You know, what are their issues and their problems, and then they started to break them up into domains. It was like 2 months of workshop with the business people. So I like the way of thinking, keeping it simple, right? That was one of your things, you know, doing pretty fast, you know, talking with people, creating relationships. Was there any other words of wisdom that you guys remember? I forgot. Beers, yeah, okay, thanks for that.